We are live. All right, back at it again. Blockchain buzz. I don't mess it up when Rue's not here, apparently. So what's going on, guys? Back with my guys, Jesse and Max. What's happening, guys? How you feeling today?
I'm feeling great. I'm glad to be back with Jesse and so on. For all you guys who are like, well, you have sunglasses on. Is it bright inside your house? Yeah. It's actually extremely bright inside the house. And bright outside too. So, yeah, that's what's going on.
Yeah, and backstage we coined this night Black Saturday. So for everybody in the chat, welcome to Black Saturday.
Yes, sir.
You're gonna panic, people. They're gonna think crypto's gonna crash. Yeah, Quentin says when Valhalla. Yeah, make sure you guys hit the likes. All right, so big news today, guys. Big news coming out of Jasmy. Now, I made a video talking about it this morning. I did a little bit of TA on it. Looks like we have a potential breakout of a bull flag on Jasmy as well, but timing for a bullish structure for a mainnet launch. But let's talk about it, guys. Max, I know that you have a lot to talk about when it comes to this. So I want to jump into Jesse's thoughts real quick before we dive into it. What are your thoughts? How much did you get to read on it there, Jesse, this morning? And what are your thoughts on the release of the mainnet?
Well, I'm sure, like a lot of people, I saw the couple X posts that came out. Obviously, caught my attention. Jasmy mainnet. I mean, that's something that they've been working towards, talking about for years. It's been years. It's interesting that it's finally happened, and now there is a way to use Jasmy for utility. So pretty cool, right? It's a steady evolution of the project. So I think, it's still very, very early days, but I think what's evident more than anything is kind of the growth and Hara's growth and the growth within the blockchain world. I don't think they were anywhere near this a couple years ago. So it's come a really long way. So that's pretty cool that I think they finally got there.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people have been, like a lot of us have been waiting a long time for this product to come out to market. Do you think that this is going to help when it comes to the innovation zone with Binance for April? I think April would be the next time they evaluate, right?
I would assume so. So, in my view, the reason that they're in the innovation zone is they've never had the blockchain explorer. So, like most blockchain websites you go to, there's like a blockchain explorer. It shows you all the transactions on the ledger, all that stuff, basically proving that a crypto thing is real, right? And they've never had that. And when you went to their website, there was none of that. If you looked them up, it was hard to find things. There wasn't. I would say that coin market cap wasn't always updated or current. There was a long time that the supply was wrong, all kinds of issues. So, I think all of that kind of comes together now with Jasmy. So hopefully it will kind of turn the tide here. I mean, again, it's really early days, but I'm just excited that they finally did it. Finally, I mean, again, this is years in the making.
Yes, you and I have been talking for years at this point about this moment, about the mainnet launching, and I remember having conversations with you probably 2 years ago about how the reasons why we were in the monitoring zone. And one of the big ones that you had speculated on was, well, they don't have a product out to market.
Yeah, if you didn't know anything at all about Jasmy a couple years ago and you looked it up, then you're still not going to know anything within 10 minutes, was kind of how it was. And I guess I kind of came to that realization because at the time, one of the guys had set up like a private Discord, And there was probably like 10, 20 of us in there at some point, and maybe 30, that were all kind of posting things and things that we found. And it was like, holy crap, like there's a lot here, but it's so hard to find. And you kind of had to scour the web and old articles and the Wayback Machine and all these different things to kind of tie it all together. But the interesting part with all of that is that some of those things would sort of be you know, they would be on the horizon, let's say, right? Like we'd see little inklings of things that would later be announcements, and it was kind of like they'd be found before the project ever said anything about them, you know. So you know, that was pretty cool to see that. But the point is that if you didn't know anything at all, and you're one of like 3 interns that are in charge of the innovation zone, and you looked up Jasmy, you weren't going to know anything in 10 minutes anyways. And so that's why I think it's been in there ever since. And so, yes, hopefully this finally gets it out of there, because clearly it's a real project, you know?
Oh yeah, I mean, oh, absolutely. In terms of being a real project, I've seen so many accusations over the years, from Hara being AI to Jasmy being a scam and a rug and stuff like that. And I'm just like, rugs don't stick around for like 6 years and keep building, right? They just rug and they disappear, you know?
Yeah. Rugs are usually anonymous, right? This isn't anonymous. I mean, the guy's still going to ETH Denver, and you know, he's got like a calendar of events where he's going to be there. And I mean, you've even met him in person, you know? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Or was I just talking to thin air, right? He's like John Cena. I couldn't see him, right? No, but yeah, absolutely. And even like, I don't know if you caught it. Most people, I mean, you probably caught it, but when I was talking with Hara in part 2, he tells me that, and volunteers the information, I didn't ask, but he talks about how Ondo is still in the office on a regular basis every week. In fact, he went into detail about how Ondo actually lives only a few blocks away from the building and walks to work every day. Right? Like that's on. Yes, Ondo spent decades building a reputation with Sony, sharing the stage with the likes of Steve Jobs, to rug pull a crypto coin in his twilight hour, right?
Yeah, I don't think so. Now, obviously, you know, the original owner of Jasmy, there is, I wouldn't say a rug pull, but it's not the same ownership. Ownership changed. The guys that own it now are Ondo and Sato. So between the two of them, I mean, it seems to, everything's above board. Like there is no scam anything. There's nothing under the surface weird. Anyway.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of that comes from people who just, at the end of the day, just don't do research, right? A lot of one of the biggest problems I've found when investing in crypto and social media collided, right? There was almost like a boom of ignorance, right? The big bang, right, of ignorance almost, and it's people get stuck inside these echo chambers and that feed them information that they want to hear, right? And then they regurgitate it, and that's actually one of the reasons I created this show, was that so that people who follow me don't get caught inside an echo chamber of only my opinions and what I think. There's nothing I enjoy more than someone coming on respectfully and having a different opinion than me on whatever given subject, because maybe I'm wrong, right? But there's just too much of people who are not willing to admit that they could be wrong, or like, again, so they make videos and content saying everything's going to zero except ICP, and then next thing you know, right, you got other people repeating it. So it's a big problem.
Yeah, and I would say also that outside of that, there's a big difference between an investor and a gambler, and obviously crypto has both. So you can kind of see some of that, and in some of the posts that are out there now. You do see in crypto good projects that fail over time. I mean, we've had a few of those recently, right? things that had a lot of promise that, said they're closing up shop. And
Cadena.
yeah, I mean, that one had a lot of promise and fell flat, right? It's dead. So that one went to zero. But the whole Jasmy thing, I mean, it's 2026. Like, they started in 2017.
Yeah.
We're a year away from a decade with this thing,
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing with Cadena is, like, in the previous cycle, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't they run neck and neck with Solana for most of Solana's run in the 2021 cycle?
They
Their
had a
logo,
really good run.
yeah, their logos were even like the same color scheme as at the time as Solana, right? They had that pink purple vibe going on, right?
I thought they had a great logo, and they had their claim to fame was their throughput was like insane. It was through the roof. They had the blockchain guru on the team. They kind of had all the hallmarks of something great. They even had it was like Cadena Echo or Eco, that it was like their ambassadors. I mean, they had a lot together. But that run, I remember it trading at like $22, $23, $25, and it went all the way down to pennies. So it just couldn't withstand that. It's the bottom line. They had all their eggs in that one basket, and they never diversified. And so when it sunk, the whole thing sunk.
Well, and Cadena is a perfect example of a rant I went on yesterday when somebody had asked me about Caspa, right? Now, I like Caspa. I hold Caspa, and I think Caspa will do very well in the future. So this is not a full frontal assault on Caspa or anything. Don't take it that way. It's more a full frontal assault on layer ones, right, than any one specific project. Now, you could watch any given content creator covering any given layer one, and what do they talk about? Security, scalability. They've got the trifecta, right? They've done it all, and that's what they all say, right? It's the fastest, it's the cheapest, security, blah, 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 blah. They all say the same things, right? So Caspa came up with a recent update talking about more security, more scalability on this Night DAG or whatever update that they have coming, which is great, right? And the problem is that everyone gets hyped up about these layer ones and say, well, they're going to be faster now. They're going to be more secure. They're going to be cheaper, blah, 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 blah. What matters? Who's building on it? Right? Who's building on it? If the answer is, if I ask you the question, name one crypto project building on, let's say, Caspa, right? Name one, just off the top of your head. Don't go Google it or look it up. Name one. If you can't, you might have a problem, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, market share can sink you, right? I mean, I think that's the hardest thing in the altcoin world is the market share, right? I mean, between the Bitcoin and Ethereum, there's only so much left for everybody else. And then you're pushing in the meme coins, you're pushing in all this bogus crap, the rugs, amongst some real ones that are in there trying to make it. And it's tough. It's really tough. I mean, and you got to kind of have a like I said earlier, you got to have that charismatic leader that somehow keeps it relevant, that keeps everybody talking about it. And you always got to have that thing on the horizon that it's just out of reach, to kind of keep engaged.
You got to have Charles.
Yeah. It's like owning a bar. Good luck keeping that relevant, right?
It's a fad. Yeah, absolutely. Most projects like layer ones, the good ones when they launch, they can have fantastic runs for, a good year, right? And the problem for me, I find with a lot of people is you cannot marry your bags, right? If you get into a project, for example, Caspa, early, and you see let's say, I don't know, like with Caspa, I saw a monumental profits on that project, but let's say you saw like 1,000% move, let's say, right? At that point, man, I know there's going to be a lot of content creators saying it's going to this, that, and everything. Not financial advice, but you got to just take the win and then move on, right? Too many people, they get in early, they ride it all the way up, and then they ride it, and then the hype dies, like you were saying. The hype train dies, and the market share starts to go to the next flashy layer one that's showing up around the corner, and there you are holding your bags.
It's a tough lesson. Anyway, go ahead, Max.
Just a quick shout out to Ramona first there, our crypto mom. She says, "What's up, crypto masters? We love Ramona. We love our Ramona." All right, Max, what you got for us, brother?
Well, I think I can take this off now because it's not as bright as it was. So let's remove that. Don't want to make it too distracting. Saw some comments like someone tell Max to pass the blunt. That's funny. No, nothing like that. It's just legitimately super bright. But anyway, what I was going to point out is basically, yeah, glad to be here, obviously, with Rob and Jesse. If you guys haven't seen the announcements, I mean, basic stuff like this, we'll just share on the screen and we'll have a conversation about it because it's a good thing to talk about. So what are we referring to? The global account, the official account, straight from Jasmy Global Official. They don't really post a lot, do they not? So we see here basically back to what we were talking about before. Layer 2 Jasmy chain officially completed its mainnet migration. So when we talked about Junction, that was a layer 2 scaling solution, right? But that's, let's face it, that's a Junction thing, nothing wrong with that. But one of the consistent complaints was, well, what about just Jasmy, the token itself? Back to what Jesse was talking about earlier, like, are we going to be able to use this thing for utility? Well, now it seems to be so. And if anything, on Arbitrum, some of you guys are actually holding the native coin of Arbitrum. So this is an ecosystem, if you will, and it's nice to point this out. So it says here, Arbitrum Orbit, powered by Jasmy as a custom gas token, enabling a fast, low-cost execution environment for upcoming AI times Web3 use cases. So we're not going to just mention this, but we are going to have a conversation a little bit more about this. So my main thing is, you may be new to some of these terms. Maybe the whole idea of talking about some of this stuff, I don't know, maybe some people it bores them, but to me, it's understanding why you got into some of these investments like Jasmy, whether it was in good times or bad, or, I even know some people that got into Jasmy maybe around basically like 33 cents, right? When it had that massive dump off from $4.99, right? And then you still believed in it. And again, back to what Jesse was talking about with the old owner, et cetera, right? But my takeaway is, if you really get into the fundamentals about this, it is production ready. And that's great. And on top of that, you have to also keep in mind, like, there's Solidity support. In a nutshell, like, devs can port Ethereum dApps over with minimum hassle. Again, back to the whole idea of, like, why does Hara go to like ETH Denver and all these Ethereum events and so on? Again, you're reaching out to other devs that can port your product into other Ethereum dApps, make it seamless, right? If anything, future proofed. And again, account abstraction. If you really think about it, it's like, how do I put in layman's terms? It's like onboarding more Web 2 apps, gas sponsorships, corporate accounts, the works. So in crypto terms, what does it mean in a nutshell, Maximus? Just give me that. It's like basically upgrading from like a clunky sidechain to a legit layer 2 rollup. And in my opinion, everybody, it's going to open the doors for actual adoption in Japan's tech scene and beyond. And the part that we're going to get into further in regard to the quote unquote beyond is to talk about some of these things. So for one, I don't know if we spill the beans now, but I cover this even on the Patreon. I'm not sure it went with you guys too. I just was trying to give it a little bit of an early notice to the Patreon guys. But let's come back into the frame on this one. So again, Future, as in Rob, he went over, of course, to Jasmy Labs. He met with Hara, and one of the key things you guys discussed was a lot of things. But in part 2, I posted, of course, on the Patreon. I said, Jasmy documentary part 2, what you missed. And we were joking around backstage, like, nothing against some people, but some people are like, I can't understand Hara. Well, then click on the freaking gear in the lower right-hand corner. Put the captions on, right? You know, you're supposed to be, you claim that you know about this stuff. Well, again, I say politely, like these are the basic things you got to do. Just turn on the captions, and then instead of maybe playing it in fast speed, maybe because you're not getting it, you play a little bit slower speed. But anyway, we'll save you the trouble. One of the nuggets, let's talk about this, Rob, and then also Jesse, is basically, again, nonchalantly, Hara gave us a nugget, okay? And what was that nugget, basically, in a nutshell? Well, from what I gathered, there is this company, okay, hear me out, they're referred to as CoinCheck. Now, in the interview of Hara and Rob, again, nonchalantly, you know, Hara was mentioned in part 2, like, the time when Jasmy blew up on listings early with like major exchanges, you know, Binance, OKX, those were pushed hard by like Chinese market focus, basically quick liquidity. Nothing wrong with that. But again, it's a shift. All right. So what are we shifting to? And from what I gather, like the United States, South Korea, of course, especially Japan, right? Your homegrown Jasmy. But this topic got, you know, mentioned, and I kind of had to double check the captions and my transcript with that, and said CoinCheck. I that kind of sounds familiar to me. I haven't heard from them in a while. And anyway, in a nutshell, it is a big move. Global push to institutional crypto services. Yes, you heard me right on that. If you're not aware of this, we're going to jump into an actual announcement. So this is from Business Wire. It's a Berkshire Hathaway company. They covered this on January 8th, so this is still very fresh. Again, these are the little things that, you know, some people haven't got into. I need you to pull that back up on the screen, please. And basically, here's the announcement. So again, very recent, right? That's only about roughly a week ago. You see CoinCheck Group signs an agreement to acquire 3iQ. It's a global pioneer in digital asset investment solutions. So what does this mean to us? Like, what does this have to do with Jasmy? Again, back to Rob's conversation with Hara. Again, you know, we understand, like, for some people, it's like, well, it was, I couldn't quite get what he was saying. Again, just click on the captions in the future. Part 3, click on the captions. So you see here, it mentions this company is one of Japan's leading crypto asset exchanges, and at the time announced that they were entering into a stock purchase agreement with majority stakeholder Monex Group as seller to acquire approximately 97% beneficial ownership of 3iQ. Now, why point out 3iQ? Well, great question. They are one of the world's leading alternative digital asset managers based in Ontario, Canada. We know that Rob is in Ontario. Now, I'm not saying that obviously Hara mentioned that because Rob is from Canada. No, but it doesn't hurt anything. But pursuant to the agreement, and I'm not going to read all this, there was a value of 3iQ that was 11,840,476. Agree the value of CoinCheck Group stock, so on and so forth. But if you go further into the whole thing, they have milestones. And one of the milestones I do want to highlight is back in 2017. So again, it's kind of like the same amount of time back to what Jesse was talking about with like Jasmy being around. So these guys have been around basically for a while. 2017, they became the first regulated digital asset investment fund manager in Canada. 2018, they had the launch of Global Crypto Asset Fund. It was one of the first funds offering a diversified portfolio for multiple assets. But here's where it gets really interesting. 2020, they had the launch of North America's first major exchange listed Bitcoin and Ether funds for the Toronto Stock Exchange. And then when you get further into it, it's like, you know what? What about some of these other ones? Mentions here, 2023, they introduced the world's first Ethereum staking ETF. And again, this is, I'm not letting the cat out of the bag or anything like this. This is public knowledge. So for me, when I see this whole thing about the world's first Ethereum staking ETF, and I see Hara going everywhere, and then I see the mentions of North America's first Ether staking ETP, allowing investors to earn staking rewards, and then I watch that part 2, and I get the little nugget of Hara mentions some of these things. I said to myself, I can put 2 to 2 together, but I'm not gonna, go down that rabbit hole. But again, I think this is big because again, this tells me that if he's mentioning again in part 2 about this thing with what's it called again, basically, right? CoinCheck, right? Yes, CoinCheck. It's like we have heard the hints of branching out to North America, like literally here, like United States. They literally have an office. I don't know if it was you, Jesse, that covered this, or other people in the Jasmine Research Consortium, Little Bidman, and so on. But I even covered a few times. Like they have an office in Silicon Valley, and to me, like this is the path towards like more liquidity and so on. So if you combine some of this news with the recent announcement of like literally the utility to be used, this thing with Arbitrum and so on, Jasmine Chain Layer 2, again, these are big wins moving forward. And even this one, 2025 launch of one of the first Solana staking ETFs and spot-based XRP ETF. Why do I want to mention XRP? Well, we know that now we have EVM compatibility. Yes, there's a lot of FUD about the whole thing of basically Axelar, right? But we knew at the time, for the longest time, it was a major deal for Ripple. That was their EVM sidechain chosen interoperability solution. So again, in the past, I think it was 2023, 2024, even back into these X spaces, whether it's from DIP Metaverse and so on. Also Brian, all those guys that hosted those. One of the things that Dip mentioned, he literally made an article about it, and I expanded upon it as well, was like, could we see Jasmine and Ripple in the future? To me, all these things outlined shows a clear path of integration, especially with the EVM side of things. So I do want to get some of your feedback on this, Rob, or Jesse, whoever wants to take this. But yes, I did get that little nugget about CoinCheck, and I do feel as though that's a major deal. And we'll expand on some of this even further in regard to like some of the awards they got. But yeah, this is all major news. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just thinking about our conversation deeper there, me and Hara, and I can't remember if it was part 2 or if it's in part 3 coming out, the ETP part. Did we talk about it in part 2? I don't think so, did we? It's part 3.
Well, the thing is this, you didn't have to talk about in so much about all that because, again, he's mentioning some of these things, and then in the translation, it's like it's just public knowledge. Like you just go look it up. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't mind talking about this part because like he goes deeper into it and stuff, so I'll kind of skim the surface. But I do directly ask him about a spot ETP for Jasmine. Directly ask him that question, and you'll know it when you see it. That's why I think it's in part 3, because his face lights up like a Christmas tree, and he just, this big smile comes across his face, and he just looks at me and he says, what did he say? How did he word it? I can't remember how he worded it, but he said something to the effect of you're great, you have great guesses, or something like that, he said, right? He lights right up and says it, and then he dives right into the fact that, and I will say that yes, there is in works already right now, currently, the wheels are already in motion for a spot Jasmine ETP. What are your thoughts, Jesse?
Yeah, by all means, Jesse, go for it. Because I mean, the way I look at it is like just investigating CoinCheck on the surface with that last announcement on the 8th. What does it mention? ETP, ETF, and then all this EVM stuff with Ethereum. It's like, come on, you you prepared for this a while back. This has been in the making for years.
I agree. I agree with you. I know Rob and I talked about that at one point, and I said that. I said, why not them? Why couldn't they do it? And Hara has obviously been looking into this and been working on it for quite a while. One of the early things with Jasmine that had kind of caught my eye a long time ago was this sort of like global ambition, right? You don't always see that. And I think that comes from that Sony influence and sort of being a global enterprise, that they're all over the place. And I think Jasmine kind of had that to begin with, that they've always wanted to go global, but they need the right products, and they kind of need all their ducks in a row. And it seems like we're getting closer to that, right? So we've now got the mainnet. We've got their various, other products, their secure PC, all that kind of stuff, that's their physical stuff. And I think, they've always been very mindful of the financial side of things. And again, this ties back to the Sony days, where they would have been all over um, the financial issues and implications and kind of what's the next step. Like in the corporate world, it's pretty obvious when somebody's got their stuff together because they've got like a 2-year plan, a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan. If they can't tell you what they're going to do next year, then that's not a good sign, right? And I think that the Japanese have always just been so meticulous. Like, I mean, they really are. Like, they're just sort of toiling away over there, nose to the grindstone, one goal, and they kind of just slowly grinding it out. And that's kind of what this whole process, I think, feels like for a lot of us who have been here for a long time, is they're just kind of grinding out that win that there were all the signs of it a long time ago. But, again, we've always had this sort of a bit of a disconnect between the Japanese and the English. I get that side of it. And, the information isn't always forthcoming. It's not like a stock. They're not obligated to share literally anything. They don't have to tell us about their business partners, but clearly they're thinking global here. So I think it's a really big deal. Yeah. So sign of more to come.
Yeah, Jasmy, in terms of being a global company, I agree. I've always looked at companies like Jasmy and Ripple as these companies that are going to be household names, a decade from now, and you're going to be using a lot of their tech and stuff on a day-to-day basis that you don't even know you're using, right? No different than right now when you pick up your phone to check Facebook or whatever the hell it is, check X or whatever. You don't sit there and think I'm using the internet, right? You just pick up your phone and you just use the internet. And I think that stuff like Jasmy, for example, being able to, if I'm frozen out there, guys. I think I skipped there. Did I freeze out for a minute?
Yeah, for a second. You're back though. Go ahead.
So anyway, yeah, like I think that, especially something like the personal data locker, for example, everyone's going to be utilizing this on a day-to-day basis because everything is going to be an IoT device. Everything already is, but it's going to get more and more to that degree as we move further and further along. Like I've joked time and time again about how even your toothbrush is going to be connected to the internet, right? We already have electric toothbrushes. It's not a stretch that at some point it's going to have Wi-Fi in it, right? Everything, your guitars in the background, like, everything you could think of that you use, your watches, like if you're wearing a Fitbit or something like that, like all this stuff collects your data and uploads it to your PDL, but you're not going to sit there thinking, I'm using my personal data locker right now, or I'm collecting data right now to get paid for it and I can sell it. That's all just going to happen, right? And I think we're going to see that degree of adoption for companies like Jasmy and Junction as well.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, they were really early on for IoT. And I remember they had a graph at one point that kind of had all the different IoT devices, that there could be theoretically. But if you think about it in this sense, that the big draw with IoT is the user data, right? And if you can put a smart anything on anything in your house, basically every single thing that you touch all day long, if you make it smart, well, now there's data. And you can market that data, you can sell from that data. The data is the valuable part. And where you have that integration with a personal data locker, the PDL, I mean, that's like way ahead of its time. And, typically really big ideas like that usually fail. They usually don't succeed because they're too big, they're too grand. But what's interesting is, they've had, I think, like 7 or 8 patents, and they've had them for a long time now. And so clearly they're thinking of using them, and clearly they're thinking of marketing them to more smart devices and companies that are out there. It's not just Panasonic. I'm sure there's other companies on the horizon as well. So really it's the monetization of data. And this goes all the way back to the original KPIs of, can they drive that data value per user higher? And I remember those original KPIs, looking at them like, come on, no way. They're lofty goals. But I don't know if I've ever heard Hara in the time since ever come off of those. I don't think he's ever come off of them like, yeah, they were a little high or anything like that. It's just like, yep, we still think that's what it is, and that's what we're working towards.
Yeah, he doesn't, do the whole thing of like, did I stutter? Like, or say it in, the Japanese way of doing it. Like, did I stutter? No. You're right. You're 100% spot on with that, Jesse. He's never once fall back on like, oh, you know what? Yeah, like an AMA, like, oh yeah, yeah. Maybe we didn't write it up the right way. Like, that does say something, whether people think it's bonkers to hear, some of those crazy KPI targets. Go ahead, Rob.
I was going to say, yeah, I've never heard him be defensive ever, right? Never, ever. Even in preparation to me talking with him, it wasn't like a lot of these CEOs where, at first he was like, when we talked about doing the interview, he wanted it to revolve primarily around Junction. He said he would talk about Jasmy, but he wanted it because Junction is, what they're launching right now, and they want to get information out there. But he never kind of gave me any strict rules about, this is what's off limits or anything. He's just come at me, right? Come at me with it. And he wasn't defensive about it. And in fact, to be honest with you, he said he wanted to talk more about Junction than Jasmy, but then he started talking about Jasmy more than I did, right? So, that for me says a lot, like you said, right? And I have to also add on to that. Throughout 2024 and 2025, I don't think that you could point to another CEO, CFO, whatever, of any crypto company out there who's done more AMAs, public appearances and stuff like that than Hara has, right? And I'm sorry, but Charles going live on Twitter doesn't count. That's not an AMA where people are asking him questions. It's not showing up somewhere to do an appearance. Charles does that a lot, but I don't think anybody does as many AMAs. I think I counted in 2024. I think I counted like 27 AMAs or something like that. It's just like, bro, like, when do you find time for your family and stuff like that?
I would agree. I think the only person that does more is not even like, a token, right? That this is an exchange. I would say Brian Armstrong, but you can't count that either. I mean, he's done tons of interviews, right? And respectively so, because of the whole thing, especially recently with the him going deep into like, hey man, we spent like 48 hours straight just going through the Clarity Act, and geez, I can't get behind this, we're pulling out, and that's a story for another day if you guys been following it. But I would agree with your statements with that. It's like, you really start to think about it. Yeah, you know what, that does make sense. Yeah, we get examples of like projects going to Davos, or being an attendee over at Cybos, and all these so many different projects and so on. But that's a little bit different, right? Like, they're gonna be there because that's an annual thing. Stellar, obviously, Meridian, right? These are annual events. But Hara is literally, like, you're right. He has an agenda. He's going to all these different particular projects. Yeah, we talk about obviously East Denver and et cetera, but I agree. He's definitely everywhere.
Yeah, and I want to tell you guys something that he had said to me off camera that kind of, resonated with me a little bit, was that, and it felt true based on how I was treated while I was there in Jasmy Labs, in the building, right? And even before I got there, I'll get to it in a second, but for crying out loud, I was supposed to be down there for the end of November. He even reached out to me personally at the beginning of November to make sure our dates were okay because he was going out to Dubai and he didn't want to miss me, right? The guy's the CFO of Jasmy and the CEO of Junction. He's running these two companies, right? He's got a family, he's doing all this stuff, and he thinks enough to make sure that some YouTuber that's coming down, right, that we're good to go here and that our dates are not messing up. And you know what I mean? Like, that said something to me. It showed a lot of um, just character, right? And then when I got there, I was treated fantastic. And he said to me off camera that one of the most important things to him was me coming down there. Not and me When I say me coming down there, he was speaking metaphorically as though that, and he explained further that the community that is built around Jasmy, like all of us, right? Everyone on X, everyone who holds a coin, all that stuff, is the most important factor for him, right? Is to make sure that he makes time for us to answer our questions. And I think that that resonates true because, again, who does more AMAs than he does, right? He doesn't just say it; he lives it. He does these interviews, these AMAs, and then before I leave, he makes plans with me to hook back up at ETH Denver to do another interview next month in February, where I'm going to sit down with him again in Colorado, and we're going to do another interview. Right?
That's awesome. That is great to hear.
Yeah. And he even offered as well, on top of that, later in the year, he said after ETH Denver, if I wanted, anytime I want to do an AMA on the channel, on the internet too, like on StreamYard, he said, just let me know, right? And we'll do it. So
Speaking of interview, okay, so I actually want to interview you, Jesse, right now.
What'd I do? Am I in trouble?
You're not in trouble, but I want to pick your brain on something. So we're going to highlight this first, and then we're going to get into me interviewing
shut
you.
up. Chris just saved your life, Jesse.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate you, brother. Always supporting the channel. And thank you for saving my friend Jesse from destruction.
Temporary destruction. All right. So there's some things I noticed. And I think that while we got a lot of news from Jasmy Global official account about specifically like, hey, we have Jasmy Chain finally, and this layer 2 and Arbitrum and all these awesome things, I was sitting back in the cut while I was listening to you guys, and I said to myself, you know what should be the emphasis here? Back to the utility, Jesse. And I'm sure you guys at some point in the past have seen maybe some podcasts from, whether people are fans of him or not, Mark Cuban, right? So I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago, or maybe even last bull market, like 2021. Mark Cuban was in a podcast with two people. And in the podcast, guys were like, hey, I'm bullish on Bitcoin. And, one guy was like, what do you like? And then, to Mark Cuban's like, Ethereum. And then the guy's like, yeah, he's like, I like Ethereum too. You guys seen that interview by any chance? Okay, I'll just tell you more. Go ahead. No? All right, it's fine. So the guy's like, yeah, I like Ethereum too. And then they're like, well, why do you like Ethereum so much, to Mark Cuban? And then Mark Cuban's like, well, whether you like Ethereum or not with the high gas fees, he's like, it's just that. He's like, NFT gas fees. He's like, anything and everything with Ethereum. Smart contracts, gas fees. Because like, while those fees are expensive, he's like, look at when Ethereum blew up. And now I see these things with, say what you want, Jasmy with this layer 2, especially, Jasmy Chain, right? Not necessarily talking about Junction with the layer 2 scaling solution. That's a different story. But here's the kicker. Remember how we talked about these nuggets? So before I kick it over to you, Jesse, I want to show you guys something that I think, in my humble opinion, is a real treat. So let's go ahead and basically highlight this. This is straight from the Medium, and then you'll see quickly why I'm highlighting this. So for one, This is what Jasmy Global Official shared 14 hours ago from their Medium. Japan origin blockchain Jasmy chain completes mainnet migration. There's a ton of material here, okay, to get into. But the thing I want to jump down to, Jesse, is this highlight right here. Now, I'm going to read it out loud, and I think it's important that we pay attention to this. We see specifically here where it says Jasmy adopted as custom gas token. Any ERC20 token can be designated as a gas token using Arbitrum Orbit. Jasmy Chain uses Jasmy as its gas currency, connecting Jasmy fee payments to network utility transaction execution. Now, if you think about it, they mentioned this whole thing of Solidity, again, back with the Arbitrum Nitro stack, but it makes it possible for dApps built on Ethereum or other layer 2s to launch on Jasmy chain, with little change. Now, I'll state this. There's other projects that like myself and Rob cover, like obviously like Swift blockchain. And to me, this is like a taste of kind of like what Swift blockchain does, because they literally have this model, if you will, but with like, oh my gosh, like basically it's called bridgers, and they could do like 400 plus ones out there, you know, your XRPs, your Stellars, everything, layer 1s, layer 2s, and so on. But again, back to this whole thing about ERC20. So again, designated as a gas token. And again, go back to the top part, and I'll kick it over to you here in a second, where it says basically Jasmy uses Jasmy as its gas currency, but again, connecting Jasmy fee payments to the network utility. Now, watch this. If we kick it over to Hara, does he highlight specifically that section? And the answer is yes. So there is something here. He points out 11 hours ago, Jasmy chain mainnet live, again, EVM compatible on Arbitrum with Jasmy as the gas token. Let's build real world Web3 from Japan to the world. So again, he points out specifically the whole thing with the gas. And if you think about it, so many people for years would point out, oh, I don't like Jasmy because it's ERC20 token. But now you see this thing where you're going to have this fully fledged EVM compatible product, and if anything, highlighting the gas with that. So to me, this means more liquidity, because finally, back to what you said at the beginning of our show, Jesse, the utility will finally be used. I want to get some of your feedback on this, of why they're specifically highlighting the gas token. Go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. And thank you for all that, Max. That was a lot of detail there.
Sure.
You know, I think, so first off, they've always been very mindful of doing things right with the financial authorities. And one of the things that a lot of people don't understand is, like, you know, you run the risk of security, something being labeled a security, if you're at that company and you start talking about what you're going to do to make the value go up. You can't do that. Okay. So how you get around that is you have market makers and you give a project utility, right? And when you give it utility, then it has a use case. There's a reason to use it within the ecosystem. Now, you also kind of highlighted on the interoperability, right? Like the future is interoperable within the blockchain world. If you're siloed, you're going to lose business. You have to be interoperable. And I think there's a few different things in here that are really important. And so one of them is that he's mindful, I think, reading the tea leaves here, of raising the value of the token. He can't say that publicly, but that's exactly what he's doing with the gas move. Okay, so yeah. I think he's thinking about that. Now, the interoperability is very interesting, because now you start talking about the PDL and the patents, and can this thing be interoperable with other blockchain projects, right? Another thing that I think about is in Japan, for the longest time, it was Jasmy and a star, right? And that was it. And a star left. They went to Singapore and then they came back. And so, who are all the? Where's the blockchain builders of Japan? Well, those are the kids of tomorrow, right? I mean, these are the people watching it now that could be starting projects, and they could be building on Jasmy. So I think there's a lot of implications with kind of what's being done there and using it for gas. Now, outside of all that, you also kind of introduce this deflationary aspect to Jasmy as well, supply demand. Something that Hara, a term he's used for quite a long time now, is token economy, right? He likes to say that one, token economy. And that's exactly what he's doing here, right? You know, like I can think back in time to when they were doing all the exchange listings one after another constantly, and we were just like, what is going on with this thing? Like this is weird. Like most blockchain projects, no one does this. And again, he's the CFO guy, right? I mean, he came from KPMG, so I think he's very mindful of the legalities, and he's mindful of liquidity, and clearly he's still focusing on these various things. So there's a lot in the tea leaves of what you just shared, basically. But that would be my take.
Your thoughts, Rob?
Well, I agree. You can't, especially in today's age of crypto, with new rules coming into space and stuff like that. We're exiting the phase of crypto of the Wild West. So exactly, I agree 100%. You know, you got to say it without saying it, so to speak, right? We're working on the utility or the value of this project. We want to add utility to it so that eventually and inevitably the price goes up. And we do touch on the KPI goals actually in our conversation as well, Hara and I. I think that's in part 3 though, where I think it was towards the end of our conversation. And again, it's something that Hara brings up. So of course I dig into it when he brings it up. And KPI goals, according to Hara, are still the same. Right? They have not changed.
Jeez, man, if that's the case, maybe I should change my channel name from Maximus Crypto to Max KPI Finance. All right, that was kind of corny. But anyway, my point is this. I want to point out another thing for you guys to see. This is just not me just saying it. On a simple Google search, check this out, guys. I think this is it's gonna be nice, right? Let's share this on screen as well. Basic Google search, right? We're not going to do any of the deep dive hunting on this one. If you were to go over to Google and simply type in how much is gas on Arbitrum to compare to ETH, you will come up with this particular one where it says gas fees on Arbitrum are dramatically cheaper than on Ethereum, often by 90 to 99%, because Arbitrum bundles many transactions and posts them to Ethereum as one, significantly reducing per user costs, with average fees sometimes dropping to under $1 or even cents compared to Ethereum's potentially high dollar fees, which we know about, right? While Arbitrum uses more gas units like 0.1 GUI or GUI, some people call it, tomato. For execution, the gas price cost per unit is so low that total transaction costs are vastly lower than Ethereum mainnet. So wanted to share that with you guys. Again, I think I'll kick it back over to you, Jesse, because the way I look at it is now you're incentivizing people, especially with the EVM compatibility, right? Because let's face it, Ethereum virtual machines, whether people are fans of Ethereum or not, Ethereum is still the most dominant smart contract platform out there, right? Whether people like it or not, right? And we consistently see scaling solutions for Ethereum. I cover this, I think it was either on my public channel or Patreon or both, that you had Vitalik Buterin came up with a proposal about the gas situation and so on. Even Gilbert Verdian from Quant Network has this thing going on in regard to like high like actually I should say gasless transactions, which sounds nuts. Because again, Quant Network came out with Overledger Fusion Layer 2.5, which they're the only ones that have that technology. That's a topic that we get more into this later if we have time. But again, Jesse, the way I look at it is, yes, Hara and a lot of these guys from Jasmine fully recognize other chains that they could significantly benefit from. And it just makes sense that they recognize Arbitrum. I mean, those are some significant discounts. Now you incentivize other ecosystems to do a plug and play with what you have, but do you have it built? And they're like, yeah, we have it built. So glad to share that.
Before you jump in there, Jesse, I just wanted to add something for a lot of people who are, thinking that Ethereum is kind of too far gone, even in the bottom of a bear market, that it might not be a good opportunity to get it. Listen, I think that the tokenization of real world assets is really going to start to take center stage about mid 2026 and going into 2027. And make no mistake about it, I would say 70 to 80% of that's going to be built on Ethereum, right? So.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think that's a fair assessment. Ethereum, once they got that market share, they really haven't relinquished it, and even in some rough seas at times, right? But I think Max is absolutely right that all of the scaling solutions that they just kind of keep tacking onto it. Whether Ethereum ultimately gets that higher throughput that Vitalik keeps talking about, I mean, I want to say he was in the news just the other day saying that they solved some sort of problem, and I kind of have explained this to people in the past. Is what he's trying to do is like take a car from 1987 and convert it to like a Tesla. And it's like you just don't do that, first of all. And then if you do, it's not going to happen overnight. Like it's going to be a long, bumpy road, and most things aren't going to work right. And it's very challenging. So the fact that all these other companies have kind of come about as these scaling solutions is huge. And Arbitrum is one of the most popular ones that's out there right now. And so the fact that they chose that, excellent choice. And I think they knew that they needed to get it right. And I do think they got it right on this one. So it's very cool. And the interoperability, I mean, we'll see what happens. I've been waiting to kind of see them break the PDL out beyond Japan. Like obviously, Hara's talked about, the countries are kind of around there, like, South Korea and a few of the other ones, all the ones that BJIT touches. I get that. But I'd really like to see them start breaking it out elsewhere. And maybe they can do that, via some of their investors. Like I remember it was quite a while ago. I had covered something where it was about their ties to SBI and how SBI was investing in Aramco. And you think about, him going to Dubai, and could they be using the PDL in other countries? That's interesting. Go ahead, Rob.
You just kind of reminded me of something that Hara had said in our conversation as well. Because I asked him about coming to East Denver and searching for VCs in the US, right? And if he planned on doing it again and continuing to do it, so on and so forth. And what he said was, it was very productive, the conversations he had with all of the VCs about getting a foothold in the US, right? But their biggest apprehension was a lack of legal clarity. That was what made it so difficult for him to find VCs in the US for Jasmy and Junction, whether it's the PDL, the Jasmy Secure PC, or anything else, to make their way into the US and get that foothold with VC money, is because we had no legal clarity. So VCs were like, when we have a little bit more of an idea what's okay and what's not okay, is how he explained it to me. So I think that this year could be a completely different outcome for him at ETH Denver for getting a foothold in the US, maybe for the PDL itself. That would have to get Junction in the US, right?
Yeah, I would say let's hope for the best, right? And maybe I saw a video of Brad Garlinghouse talking about how, like, look, we get it, the Coinbase bailed out of this, but let's just get something, anything. Let's start the conversation, right? And you really do need that. You know, if you're trying to be global, I mean, the last thing you need is the Southern District of New York filing a suit against you and tying you up for eternity into some never-ending lawsuit, right? Likewise, you know, the SEC could turn on a dime again, and you know, we could have somebody who's attacking blockchain, and so there has to be that clarity, and it's a great viewpoint. I mean, this is like the corporate business world, right? Like the corporate business world is not going to put their money places where there's no clarity. And you know, I mean, really, you know, the farthest we've come is probably those Bitcoin ETFs really starting to take off and kind of pushing that. But even still, I mean, there's a lot to be desired, I think, on the clarity front.
Well, here's the thing that doesn't make sense to me in the Clarity Act as it sits right now. And it's that they, according to Brian Armstrong, they want to give more power and authority over crypto to the SEC, taking power away from the CFTC, right? That is a red flag for me simply because the CFTC oversees commodities, the SEC oversees securities. Why would you give more authority over crypto to a branch of government that oversees securities when we are trying to legalize crypto as or classify crypto as a commodity? This doesn't make any sense to me. This is a little bit of a red flag.
Yeah, I think the crypto market, it's like the circle peg, and we're trying to put it in the rectangle or, you know, the star, and it's like it doesn't fit in either one. Can you just make an entity that can govern it, you know, something, even if it's just an offshoot, even if we just have a guy in an office somehow, you know, can you just make something new here? And that's, I think the hard part here is that the most of the people in Congress don't understand this stuff at all. And so that's why they're trying to put it over here or over there, even though it really goes with neither one. I mean, yes, Bitcoin would fall under the commodity, and likely a lot of them that have been divested would fall under commodities. But there's plenty of other ones that did ICOs that should fall under a security. So
That's kind of what I was going to say is that now in the Ripple case, the judge said the sale, the ICO sale was a securities transaction, but XRP is not a security. So from my standpoint, from what Judge Torres said, we would be looking at, well, companies who do ICOs, those transactions would be classified as security transactions and would be overseen by the SEC. However, like you said, once they're divested, then that the crypto itself would have to be a commodity, not a security.
right, right.
You know, it's funny that Jesse brought up like CFTC, and I'm not going to do like a stellar outline, but like I just think of like the ones that are going to merge from this. It's like, come on, man. Back in 2023, Stellar, the Development Foundation, the SDF, they joined the Commodities Future Trading Commission, CFTC, and oh, by the way, as a global market advisory committee, right? So it's like they sit on that, they sit with them on these boards. So it's always interesting that like who will merge out of all the, I guess you could say, like, you know, the Coinbase flood and whatnot. But I'm looking at a lot of this stuff, and you know, if you guys get a chance, you might want to look at the whole thing of what Brian Armstrong obviously looked more into. Is I think he said he spent 48 hours dissecting the actual Clarity Act and so on, and again pulled out, and he was just like, yeah, it's because this is not in, you know, traditional banks feel as though that you're going to ruin, you're going to take away the free flow competition, but you're literally going to kill their clientele whatever, right? And then the other thing that was pointed out was um, Wall Street's say in this. And then when I think of like Wall Street saying this, again, back to Ethereum. Like long before XRP, like let's face it, guys. I mean, Wall Street kind of always chose Ethereum. I mean, literally, geez, I don't know if you guys followed the whole thing with Jay Clayton in the past. The pictures of what was it? Actually, not Jay Clayton. Bill Hinman. Excuse me, Bill Hinman. When he was golfing with Vitalik Buterin and his family. I don't know if you. I don't know. That sounds conspiracy, but like you literally see these pictures, and it's just like, yeah, in the past, many years ago, right? Way before 2021. We're talking anywhere from 2017, 2018, 2020. Like you see clearly that Wall Street bet on Ethereum. Well, then if you have this whole thing of Brian Armstrong point out, that yeah, Wall Street, they're going to be kind of pissed off with this. All right, then who emerges from here? Is it still Ethereum? What will this mean for ecosystem participants? You can throw Jasmy in the mix because, I mean, let's face it. I mean, Jasmy is ERC20 and so on. So is it more than just Jasmy? Yeah. And I think it's the ones that have projects where they're doing something kind of like what Jasmy's doing, where they put plans in to have scaling solutions, like recognizing, look, we can't just settle for, just this native token and we have no layer 2.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, man. I'm with you. Jesse just had to step away for a second. I'm with you, man. What do you think, though, Max, about the Clarity Act and the fact that allegedly the Democrats want to push it to 2027 because of the midterms? Do you think we're going to see the Clarity Act pass this year, or do you think it's going to end up getting pushed off so that it doesn't affect the markets in a positive way?
I want to say I want to see it pass this year. I know there's a lot of pressure on people like David Sachs, right? Back to Charles Hoskinson, he pointed that out. And if you saw that interview where he came on camera and he was just like, look, if we can't do something in the positive direction in regard to the Clarity Act, then I feel as though David Sachs should resign. I mean, these are all political based moves. Puts a lot of pressure, obviously, on the Trump administration to come through, because let's face it, a lot of his base, right? Again, I'm not trying to make this political, is recognizing that, look, like a lot of people were like, hey, Trump, the Republicans and so on, like, we got to get this guy in because he's going to really push forward with this. So, man, I mean, it's kind of like, where do we go from here? I think they're going to deliberate a lot on this. I think there's going to be a lot that's going to happen between now and May. Basically, shout out to this guy. And if you guys follow him, his name is Keith D. Did an excellent job breaking down the whole thing of what's really behind, the Clarity Act situation. But, yeah, I mean, like, it goes back to the whole thing of Jerome Powell for a moment. Right? I know I'm all over the place, but like, some people pointing out, especially Keith D, he pointed out like, well, if Jerome Powell is going to be literally out by May, then why is Trump making such a big deal? It's more to it than just that. And one of the things that was discussed is that Jerome Powell still sits on the governing body of the Federal Reserve. So just because you take him away from his official position, right, of being the head guy, he's still going to have so much oversight there. And I think Trump realizes that, yeah, you're cutting off the head of the snake, but in reality, he's still there, right? Like maybe grows another head. So does he replace his own guy? I think he wants to push towards that. And then, all right, so then again, let's say, for example, we do get a new guy and he drops the interest rates way down and so on. Well, then, okay, where do we go from there? And there's so many deep aspects to this. It's like geopolitical, but even locally, it plays such a major factor with everything. I mean, even if you look at the whole Venezuelan situation, it's so much more than just oil. You look at the whole thing of Greenland. I mean, People don't realize, like, and again, I'm not trying to make this a Greta Thunberg situation, but again, Greenland. I wish I could share the short with you guys, but I think I'd get hit with copyright, unfortunately. There was this guy who did a short, or I should say short, but like the vertical one, and it shows that the difference now geographically with Greenland is, I think it's in the northwestern area. You've had this route, right? So there's new trade routes, right? That have, how she says, the ice has melted to a degree where now from Russia, geographically speaking, they can cut through, like, oh my gosh, like northern Canada, the Arctic area, and come right through this area, this narrow area that's northwest, I want to say Greenland. And that creates a whole other spectrum of things. And of course, this guy pointed out that before, during the Cold War, we used to have these bases to kind of protect during that time. But now it's like, yeah, these are trade routes. So naturally speaking, even from a Russian point of view, I'm not trying to be pro-Russia, right? You got to look at it from like, yeah, that'd be beneficial to them. Well, what are we going to do? So, I mean, there's so many things. It's freaking crazy. I mean, we just got into 2026 and already it just is absolutely nuts with everything that's truly going on, right? Geopolitically speaking. And it does affect, I hate to say it, like our basic things of like, man, are we going to get this wealth that we've been dreaming about for a few bull markets or bear markets? Anyway, I can go on and on about this, but welcome back, Jesse.
I think that you're absolutely right. Sorry, Jessica, go ahead. You were going to say something.
I was just going to say thanks for welcoming me, Max. Appreciate that.
No problem.
Yeah, there's so many intricacies, and I think one of the biggest problems is that even on television, on the news, Squawk Box, whatever it is, the professionals that they have come on, these analysts, everyone just sees one layer, one perspective, one position. Well, inflation, right? Well, the jobs numbers, right? And they look at it through that lens and that lens alone. When, like you said, there are so many intricacies that trickle, and the effects trickle down to so many different facets of the global economy as a whole. And I think that, and like you said, with Powell, sorry to kind of jump over, but with Powell not being the chair of the Fed anymore, doesn't mean that he's not still a commissioner, and doesn't mean that he still doesn't have a vote when it comes to rate cuts and all that kind of stuff. So you hit the nail on the head there. A lot of people think that because Powell's not going to be the chair doesn't mean that he's not still influential there, right? He also has
Right.
a vote, and he literally still gets a vote on whether they cut rates and stuff like that. So with Trump replacing him, it's like a two-person swing, right? Because you get rid of Powell, you get to put in a new chair for the Fed, but you get rid of him as a commissioner, you get to replace him too. Now you've got two people who are voting in your favor as opposed to just removing Powell. And this whole legal case against him, which, I mean, I chuckle inside when I see people talking about it. They're like, well, I don't think that Trump can really, he's got to prove this, he's got to prove that. It's not about proving whether Powell lied in front of Congress. It has nothing to do with it. Trump has no intention of winning a legal case against Powell with the DOJ and proving that he lied in front of Congress. This is about it being easier to remove him as a commissioner from the Fed when there's an investigation going on around him. That's what it's about. There is no, we need to win this. We need to prove that Powell broke the law. That's
Right, and
not what
it's not the whole thing just with Trump. Everything says, "Oh, it's just Trump opening this." I mean, you get recently. I don't know if you follow her, like Representative Luna, was opening up an investigation, and I think the dominoes will fall. There could be obviously more. Does he end up, being a sinister person who did all these things they claim? I don't know. I mean, I'm just like anybody else. I want. Hopefully, we can get the outcome of truth. But let's say, hypothetically speaking, that they did have enough dirt on him. Well, let's face it. Like, it doesn't matter if it's just Trump or Representative Luna, et cetera, et cetera. If there actually is something there and did do criminal behavior, especially with some of his announcements. I think that what they're referring to is what he mentioned last, I want to say like August of 2025, give or take. But let's say that that's true, right? He is guilty and they can prove it and all that. Then, if anything, this does solve some of the things, whether it's the Trump administration want moving forward, because then you can remove him from the governing body of the Fed. So instead of just cutting off the head of the snake, you would be physically removing him, period. So then enter in the whole thing of you have a new Fed chair, a new head, and then now Powell is not part of that anymore. And then I don't know if there's other people part of that governing council that have loyal ties, obviously, to Powell. There could be, but you would radically change the geopolitical dynamics of it all. And I think that is worth pointing out.
Yeah. What do you guys think the market will go after Trump's EU thing? I don't think the market really cared. It didn't really do much today. I was joking around on the Patreon earlier because people were talking like Trump just dumped the markets in terms of the whole EU thing and the new tariffs and stuff like that. But Bitcoin's price literally was doing nothing. It's like, what is everyone freaking out about? They're just so used to Trump saying something and the market crashing that he said something and they just responded as though the market was crashing. I was like, have you guys actually looked at crypto? It's not crashing. Like, what's the problem?
I'd like to just interject this, and I do want to get some of Jesse's feedback too, because he just came back. But I honestly think it's this simple, right? Like when we talk about even stocks, right? What causes a stock to go, for example, parabolic? It's supply and demand forces. Some of the forces that people don't even realize. When crypto, again, I think you and I talked about this with Rue on our Patreon collabs. Previous bull markets, especially 2021, right? You could have just a positive catalyst and the project would get sent, right? And now I think moving forward, a lot of the news, especially, you know, us, like we're reporting on something juicy and, you know, I'm not oblivious to it. I see people in the comments, they're like, oh, this great news, Maximus, you know, my price of my coin, my tokens, they go in the mid. I'm only in this short term anyway. I want to go paper hand all this, but you don't know that because I want to bitch in the comments. All right, sorry, pardon my French. That goes on everywhere, right? So my thing is, like, just because you want to in the comments doesn't change the fact that there is supply and demand forces. So again, if stocks are about supply and demand forces, right, where you see the thing go parabolic and so on, again, what about crypto? Okay, so what about crypto? We in crypto tokenize this. Stocks, you don't have tokenized representations of the stock yet, right? We're moving to that. So what happens now, right now, moving forward? This is just me, and this is probably something you never heard me say before. I think, temporarily speaking, it's not even a price prediction, right? This is just my own prediction. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'm allowed to have an opinion. So people are like, oh, you're a content creator. You're not even allowed to have freedom of thought. Give me a break, right? That's another topic for another day. But here's what I honestly think. I think, temporarily speaking, because of this whole thing, especially with the Clarity Act and so on, especially with what Brian Armstrong shared, back to the whole thing on Wall Street. Because whether you like Wall Street or not, they do have a lot of money involved in Ethereum. So do you see, temporarily speaking, demand forces for Ethereum to rise? Personally, I think the ecosystem does this thing, temporarily speaking. Is it going to be the first quarter and so on? Yeah, I honestly think Ethereum-based products, ecosystems will dominate, temporarily speaking, until we get more of that momentum moving forward. I know a lot of people don't want to hear that. I honestly think that's what's going to go on. I could be wrong. Again, first quarter, could it be second quarter? Yeah. But once we finally get the whole thing of like, hey, we have an update on what we're going to do with the Clarity Act, and, you know, there is, quote, clear clarity, because right now there isn't, then those other alts, right, like your XRPs, your Stellars, et cetera, which is a disruptor of that traditional Wall Street system that does have ties to Ethereum, then again, it's just basic. Those could very well start to take off. But until then, it's just going to be a lot of back and forth. You may see temporary hints of the fear and greed index, as we've seen, right? Like it's gone from 1920-ish. Now I think we're at 50-51. it's kind of neutral. Would Ethereum-based products, right, that ecosystem, tip the needle over? Could very well do so, right? As we know, still Bitcoin and Ethereum, I think, is 78 to 82% of the entire market. So if Ethereum takes the cake, it would bring some of the market with it. And some people are like, well, then, other things that are outside Ethereum could still pump. It could, right? But as far as it being anything significant, like 80 or 100%, I just don't see that personally right now. But again, we're all paying attention to it and so on. But yeah, Ethereum-based ecosystem products and so on, which would involve your Jasmines and so on, I think they do their thing. And what did we see recently with Jasmine? Again, that was a positive catalyst, but the utility. And the utility says it's finally going to be used. So watch out for projects that have real utility. They're going to use the gas. And again, whether you're a fan of Ethereum or not, it just kind of tells me it's like, yeah, we should investigate that more. And that's what we're doing right now. So there you go.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest battles for people who are investing in crypto is that a lot of people who come in don't really have any investing background or experience. And we indoctrinate them as a community into crypto expecting to have a Lamborghini in 6 months of investing, right? And it's really the fault of a lot of en masse content creators who push that narrative out there, right? Buy a meme coin and be rich, and put $800 into Pepe and walk out with 8 million in 6 months, right? And so that's what they expect. So anything short of that, like I always am trying to tell people, you should be entering crypto with an 8-year mindset, a 2 full cycle mindset of gaining any true significant life-changing wealth for yourself, right? Give it time, right? And the biggest battle is that people don't want to give their investments time to mature. And Max, me, I say this all the time off camera, dress for the job you want, not the job you have, right? Same thing. Behave like you have the job you want, not the job you have. And if you want to be a successful multimillionaire investor, well, the first thing you have to do is you have to start behaving like one, right? Do you see these people every time one of their favorite stocks has a dip, going on X and hate typing in people's comment sections and stuff like that? Like, they don't behave that way, right? If they believe in it because they've done the research, when it dips, they buy more of it and they wait. They let time pass. They don't sit there looking at their portfolio every 5 minutes, freaking out, because they have a bigger picture. They have a plan for the rest of their lives. And that's the problem, is that I think that a lot of people who are in crypto, you can tell the people, I guess what I'm trying to say, you can tell the people who are going to make true life-changing wealth versus the people who are going to make some money and then be broke again inside of like 2 years. It's like the person who wins the lottery, right? And then they just spend it all because they weren't ready to be rich. They weren't ready to be wealthy, right? If you want that kind of wealth to come in fast, you're probably going to lose it just as fast, right? Because you're not, on an investment standpoint, mentally and emotionally mature enough to succeed long term.
No, I would agree with that. Go ahead, Jesse.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think, kind of tagging on to that having a long-term, decade-ish strategy is the only way to get around the daily ups and downs, the chaotic nature that's currently in the world, thanks to the US, obviously. I think that, in the business community, for the most part, doesn't like disruption. In the endless day-long gaslighting constantly is very disruptive. When you got somebody that doesn't care about rules, he doesn't care about laws, he doesn't care about precedent, he doesn't care about anything. Whether you've been an ally, whether you're not an ally, doesn't care. So, it's a very odd time. And I haven't looked at it, but I would imagine that the VIX, the volatility index, is probably high, if I had to guess. I mean, it's a challenging time, because I think everybody, we see these opportunities, but in the short term, it's a bumpy road. This is going to be, as long as he's still kicking, there's going to be turbulence. I mean, that's just how it is, day in, day out. And I mean, I don't know how you guys feel about it, but every once in a while he'll get one thing sort of right, and I'm like, hey, maybe we can go with this. And then the following day, it's like, then we just tanked it. That thing that we were hoping that we finally, kind of like getting Gensler out of there. It was like, hey, we finally got something. And then he launched the meme coin, and you're like, no, like that's not what we wanted, And I don't know. It's a tough time right now, but again, you can weather the storm if you kind of have that long-term plan and you're investing in things that are legitimate, obviously. So hopefully that works out for us. Now, one thing I was going to say, Max, to comment on your stuff about Greenland, and you were talking about the trade routes. What's interesting about that, I never really thought about it from that aspect. I've always thought about Greenland for the raw materials, but this is true that in a warming climate, trade's a big deal, and the global trade comes on ships, et cetera. But what's interesting is those northern trade routes, they've been like impassable for centuries. Exactly. And there's so many stories of ships that have all crashed or never seen from again because they go that route, so interesting take on that for sure.
Yeah, and it basically it shows the areas that were just flat out frozen, right? Like there's no way you're getting through that. I mean, don't get me wrong, I guess Russia has some cargo ships that are literally designed to cut through a lot of these, I guess you could say ice, glaciers, and so on. And that's a story for another day. But when I saw this, and then I actually like looked up some stuff, I was like, yeah, wow, this guy's actually right. Which actually makes me bullish on things like XDC. And you may wonder, why is that? Because literally they're tied to maritime law. And when you look at electronic bills of lading, these are actual electronic certificates that are tied to things like trade routes. And what about the UK? UK has been the British Empire, right? So the British Empire has been the dominant force for maritime law for centuries. And they do want to lead the charge moving forward to things like Web 3. So Japan missed out on Web 2. You better believe that when it comes to like the UK, they're ready position. Like they set the standard and so on. I don't know if we have much more time, but if we did, I have roughly just something that would take maybe like 10 minutes that I wanted to point out specifically on this topic of coin check. I did want to highlight that I didn't have a chance to do,
sure.
Which is good.
I'm gonna step away for a quick minute, but yeah, go ahead, share it up.
Okay, so basically, let me at least get the screen going. Yeah, let's pull this back up. All right, so earlier, especially if you're just tuning in, thank you so much. Consider smash that like because currently speaking, let's just refresh it real quick on the channel. Right, we have 74 likes, 60 watching, so we do appreciate you guys smashing a like. You already did. But nonetheless, yeah, let's get back into it. So if you missed the beginning of this, later on we have this chopped up and whatnot, at least I will. You see here this topic, about coin check. And people wonder, like, well, why do you guys point that out? Well, again, at the beginning of the outline, we did point this out, and especially in Jasmy documentary part 2 with Rob going over to Japan. He met with Hara and so on. And again, sometimes it was kind of hard to hear Hara, or you guys didn't turn on the captions. It's okay. We're bringing this to you. So one of the things that Hara brought up was coin check. Now, just check this out. Here's a little bit more about them. For one, it is a NASDAQ-listed holding company based in the Netherlands. Core subsidiary CoinCheck Inc. operates as one of Japan's leading crypto asset trading platforms. CoinCheck has ranked #1 in crypto trading app downloads in Japan. Look at that, guys. For over 6 consecutive years, 2019 through June 2025. I think this is important to highlight. And like I said, through advanced technology, robust security infrastructure, and again, aims to foster an ecosystem where new forms of value exchange. I love that term because again, think about Ripple. They're enabling the internet of value. And again, this will enable crypto and assets and blockchain so they can flourish. This sounds great in my opinion. All right, so we talked about this earlier. Here's the other thing I want to get into. And I understand, again, and maybe people get tired of me harping on this, but I do need to, and it's not going to go away, whether you like it or not. So shout out to Gilbert Verdian. Check this out. He points out some shifts in finance are loud. Others are quiet, but far more important. Today, Quant is announcing a partnership with Dentsu Soken in Japan. Now, you may be wondering, like who exactly are they? I'll pull them up for a second and basically share some key insight with you guys. And again, we know that Jasmy picked Chainlink for interoperability, more marketing, et cetera, right? Like there's so much that Chainlink can provide. Obviously, they're the king of oracles and so on. From the Japanese translation to English, you see that Dentsu Soken is this right here. It's an account for updates to Dentsu Research Institute Tech blog. You see some of the people here. Again, the story of hosting first year Amazon Web Services study session with 3 companies. They have some of these things about verification, domain-based outbound communication control in AWS. Interesting things. And a lot of the reference has to do with protecting things like private data, right? Which is a good thing. Now, I don't want to do a deep dive so much on Dentsu, but what I do want to show you guys is back to what Gilbert Verdian mentioned. He said, over recent years, our work done in the UK has shown that digital money doesn't have to sit outside the financial system to innovate. Tokenized deposits and programmable settlement can be designed inside regulation, inside banks, and at institutional scale. And he talks about what's interesting that's going to happen next. Let's focus on Japan, because obviously Jasmy is, especially with that announcement that we gave you guys in regard to specifically CoinCheck. And as we see here, Gilbert points out, Japan is approaching these questions in its own way within its own regulatory and market context, but the direction of travel is clear. Major economies are beginning to think seriously about how programmable money fits into real-world financial infrastructure. This partnership is building that foundation with institutions at center. So again, even back to what we discovered in regard to specifically this topic of institutions, because when we get more into it, it's like, you know what? You have to keep in mind the Jasmy side of things. And when we get more into this, to me, it is clear that there is some common ground here. And it was a major discovery for me to unveil what I'm going to point out to you here in a second. Before I kick it over to somebody like Jesse, I want to point out our brother in space, Tokenizer, does excellent research. Make sure you give him a follow over at Tokenizer on X. He points out specifically the collaboration between QNT and Dentsu Soken will be one to watch. We already know Quant's bagged the UK over the past few years. Project Rosalind, UK RLN, which is Regulated Liability Network, and GBTD. Now, if you're new to these terminologies, GBTD means Great Britain Tokenized Deposits. Again, these terminologies. Now, think about Quant's role in regard to Japan. Let's just talk about this briefly. Quant is taking their tokenized deposit solution international with first stop in Japan. And given what we have seen with Japan's backing of ISO TC 307, which is Quant Network standard, as founded by Gilbert Verdian of the Quant Network back in 2016, 2017, again, right around the same time Jasmy came out to be, the ties to Project Rosalind have inspiration within the Bank of Japan CBDC sandbox. If you look up more material about the Bank of Japan and the research, especially with Jasmy, there's tons of material that gets really deep into it, whether it's from Little Bidman, myself, you know, Dip Metaverse. Shout out to IC Amphibian, right? Jesse's friend. But this goes all the way to who? Toyota, directly referencing Quant's patent. And we know about the correlation of Toyota to things like Jasmy. So it is, in my humble opinion, that, again, like I pointed out for years now, that Quant and Jasmy, it's inevitable that their paths will cross in some form. Is it through standards? Is it through interoperability? Could be. But again, back to what Jesse was talking about earlier, where you can't have these silos. You can't have these walled gardens, as pointed out even from Gilbert Verdian. Why? Because we have the same goal, but different borders, all unified by the same operating layer. Now watch this. I found out something that was profound. Okay. So I want to talk about this. I'm going to have us come back into, well, again, I can't do this because Rob's not here. Oh, he's back. All right. So I want to have a conversation about the discovery. And from what I gathered, gentlemen, is this. It's basically the whole idea of a familiar key player that we have not talked about in a while. Now, I think it was you, Jesse. You've done some deep dives. I don't know if it was back in 2021 or 2022 about specifically QJIT. And here's what I've gathered. Dentsu, yes, because I just pointed out the whole thing with Quant Network. This is a treat for you guys. I hope you guys really enjoy this. They are an affiliate and former Sony CSL experts. That's crucial. And of course, we know that QJIT a while back, many years ago, partnered with Jasmy on what? AI development. Now we know Jangshin's role with their layer 2 scaling solution that's built on the Optimism stack, the role that plays moving forward with GPUs, you name it, right? AI times deepen. But again, what about QJIT, right? Or QJIT, excuse me. Well, they have a thing called KJ Engine / Super AI. Again, all these things kind of hint like the Jasmy's super app. Like, is that ever going to happen? I mean, shout out to Zebek. Like, they seem like they really got some stuff going on. But you have to keep in mind, they have joint contacts with Sony Dentsu on data analysis tools. Now, before I get too further into it, and obviously kick it over to these two guys, I want to point out something that I discovered from a while back. I'll pull it up on the screen from the PR Times, and then we'll have a conversation about this because we need to. There's this thing that QJIT had announced back in September 26th of 2024 from the PR Times, and they pointed out a thing called short distance measurement system called Cloud Timer. And at that time, it was being used in a project on the YouTube channel called Tamasu University Special Autumn Discount Campaign, of course, was held at the time. But when you go down into it, these are like IoT type things. They have this thing called Sports Day. We know about, obviously, Jasmy with things even like Sagan Tosu Fan Token, which Jesse's covered in the past. Again, these devices, shoes that will let you run faster. Shout out to Yoshida-san, right? We know that Yoshida had this company. It was called Dreamforce. I'm sure Jesse remembers some of this stuff. And again, that had tied in things like baseball and so on. But again, all these IoT devices, again, these cloud timers, et cetera, et cetera. But again, the point is QJIT, and the point is obviously like things like Toyota. Now, where I find this incredibly interesting in the overlap is when you go to Dentsu Soken Hong Kong Limited, they have a workflow solution that is very, very similar to what QJIT has as well. They have a workflow solution for Microsoft 365 cloud-based solution, optimizes these operations and so on. Customers can design and make their own electronic form and approval routes. So again, think about these routes. Think about what QJIT just shared in regard to their IoT product, whether it's cloud or some of these routes. So again, common ground here. API ready for integration with other systems. Now, for me, this screams Quant without even saying Quant, and we did get the whole announcement of the partnership. Support of English, Japanese, and Chinese. Again, Jasmy has some of that. But here's the icing on the cake. Does Quant over Ledger have integration with Microsoft 365? They do. And remember when I also talked specifically about things like NASDAQ, how basically CoinCheck is listed on NASDAQ? Watch this. Overledger also basically taps into automation with NASDAQ data link time series and table data. And then there's things obviously like Jasmy to do what? Protect that specific data not falling in the hands of, like what we talked about earlier, your Wall Street players and so on. Because let's face it, they don't need to know everything about anything and everything. So to me, call this the biggest coincidence or call it a big deal. But I do feel as though there's too much common ground here that we should not dismiss Quant plays a key role in Japan with standards and obviously Jasmine with compliance. But again, the common ground really is QJIT and this company referred to as basically Dentsu Soken, because again, the common ground with QJIT, Toyota, and so on. So I want to get some of you guys' feedback on some of this. I did think it was a big deal. And again, back to the whole thing of common ground. Jesse, Rob, whoever wants to take it.
All right, I'll take it. I think what you're really highlighting there, Max, is the karetsus, right? For those on the call that haven't heard that term before, it's a Japanese term. And it's basically where you have multiple companies working together for a common goal. And they do this a lot in Japan with various partnerships. And I guess I kind of think of the karetsus that you're talking about. It's almost like the gears in a clock, right? Like they're all turning at the same time, but they overlap each other in different places. And, you can't understate all those relationships and all the spider webbing that goes on throughout. And so really, maybe what it highlights more than anything is there's a lot of opportunity, right? I mean, between all the various players, the various, Jasmine partners they've had over the years, I agree with you. The quant thing, that could be coming over the horizon. It's really been historically true that when people in the community do really good research and sort of like hit on things that we sort of think could be on the horizon, later where we found out they actually were on the horizon and they do happen. So I think you're likely onto something there. So we'll see where that karetsu takes us. And again, tapping onto that theme of interoperability, why not? That's sort of a common thing that I say when somebody tells me no, it can't be like that. Well, why not? Well, why couldn't they? Right? Why not? I think they could, and I think you're right.
That takes me back to what we talked about earlier, Jesse, where you and I had that conversation about 2 years ago in regards to a Jasmine ETP. And I said, I don't know. I don't know if we could see one, right? And you said those exact words to me.
Why not? Why not Jasmine? Why not?
Here we are.
I haven't called everything on, been spot on and everything, right? Nobody realistically can do that, right? Like I'm not an oracle in itself, but I will at least. I'm a humble guy, but I will give myself at least credit on this one. I did call the whole thing of ISO. I came out with a video. I said I got really deep into this. I said it was called. And the thumbnail was hilarious, right? I took a newspaper, like an actual real newspaper, and then on the front of it it says "Holy budget," Jasmine's budget becomes an ISO standard. And then I got deep into it and then did a follow-up video. I was just like, Jasmine can become an ISO standard. And literally 1 month later, after releasing that, boom, Jasmine becomes ISO 27001 compliant, ISMS certification. And I was just like, good God, I mean, this all kind of makes sense. And even on StreamYard, I mean, I know that, Rob, we both use StreamYard. When I logged in a few days ago, I wish I could bring up the screenshots, but it basically it shared that StreamYard became ISO 27001 compliant. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. That's Jasmine standard. And there was some other thing that also screamed Jasmine, compliance, again, with StreamYard again. So I think all these things are important. It's like standards, people, it may bore people, the concept like, oh, it's standards, so what? You need standards, because if we're talking about internet protocols being plugged in like plug and play, well, that requires a global standard. I always use this analogy, like, again, I'm here in the United States, same with you, Jesse. If we take our plug for our laptop or computer and so on, or anything, right? Like any electrical device, just that standard plug-in, that's for, NTSC, right? That's our technical standard, we bring that over to Europe, we're going to be able to plug that in the wall. No, we got to go to a store and buy like their adapter to make that work because they're on a different standard. So again, these are protocols. They have to talk to each other. Back to what you talked about earlier, Jesse, about interoperability. You can't have silos. Again, you look at Web 1, the days of CompuServe and all that. I mean, geez. Those were all siloed off. Those, you had a bunch of walled gardens, but moving forward, not just Jasmine, but like Japan, they missed out on Web 2. They clearly don't want to miss out on Web 3. Even, I know some people don't want me to mention A-Star, right? They have Sony connections, but their CEO mentioned in numerous interviews, yeah, it is true. Japan did miss out on Web 2. We are not going to miss out on Web 3. And you see that common ground. And again, people get frustrated, like, you guys aren't developing fast enough. I go back to the old Steve Jobs interviews. You guys have seen them, where Jobs points out, like, look, Japan doesn't do well with marketing, but everybody knows about their products, and their products are freaking awesome. It speaks for themselves. I also go to the basic reference to Chinese food. When's the last time you saw an advertisement on television for Chinese food, to the exception of Panda Express? I don't count that, right? But for any legitimate Chinese restaurant, you haven't. It doesn't exist. It's the same common ground, Anyway, go ahead.
It's funny. It's kind of ironic, just going back to you talking about the research that you did. How I actually got into Jasmine was ironic. It came down to research, but in the opposite way, because all I was hearing and reading was this scam token, right? This rug token, and so much FUD going on around it and stuff. And I was like, I'm the type of person that when I hear something specific about a project, right, that this negative context about this project, I need to go read it. I need to go do a dive on this topic when it comes to the subject. I need to know the truth about what's going on here, right? So I saw that. So I was like, I'm seeing all this stuff about this Jasmine project. I need to go see what's going on here, right? And one of the first things that I do when I'm researching a project is I go check who the team is, and I look at who their previous projects, what previous projects they've worked on, where they've been, what they've achieved, right? Do they have a history of scams and rugs or something like that, or what's the case here? And so the first thing I was looking at the team, I'm like, what? Well, I'm looking at the team, and I'm like, I'm not so sure that this says scam when I'm looking at it, right? But let me dive deeper. And it's just ironic that the stuff I was seeing that was put out there and designed to push people away from the project ended up making me one of the busiest Jasmine content creators on YouTube in a positive way, right? So it's just funny how actually doing your research when you hear something bad about a project can actually work wonders. I could have just said, oh, that's a scam project because I read it on Twitter and just moved on to the next thing, but I went and saw for myself, and I couldn't be happier. Next thing you know, I'm sitting in an office with the CFO of the company, right? So,
He goes by the name of Rob, Man's Crypto Future. I always say that because I remember back in the day, like I was covering Jasmine almost like just about every day, And then I remember you, I think it was 2024. You're like, hey, join, the #1 Jasmine XCN community out there, and I was like, yeah, you know what, he's right. He deserves that title, right? He kind of came and took the belt, but that's my own fault. I diversified and covered a lot of a lot of other things like XRP, Quant, you name it, and XDC, pretty much all the ISOs, but yeah. And he goes by the name of,
he was like, screw this guy.
No, are you kidding me? How many times we did collaborations and stuff? So yeah.
I don't know. Then I reached out to him, and it was history.
There you go.
Yeah. Same thing with Jesse too. I was like, man, I gotta talk to this guy. We need to have a conversation. Sure enough.
Hey, let me give you some profound wisdom. So now I don't know if my wife would agree, but I'm going to say it's profound wisdom. So my profound wisdom is this, that Jasmine is like peeling an onion. Okay. And the more you peel, it's either all real or it's all bullshit. I think it's all real. is kind of like the more you investigate, the more you go down the, wow, this is real. And that's real too. Now, how about that? You know, and you go, okay.
It's going to add some flavor or it's going to make you cry.
And it may do both along the way. This is very true.
All right, guys, we got to wrap it there. We are out of time. Almost 2 hours. It went by fast again.
Well, it works out for me. Lots to chop up. Yes. So.
There you go. All right, guys. Yeah, Jesse, I'll get back to you. I'll shoot you a text there as we finalize everything for the podcast. Everything's going good there. We talked. And same thing, Max. We will talk probably. Well, I mean, I'll see you the day after tomorrow. So, well, probably not that night. But,
no, you won't see me. You'll see me on Tuesday at some point because you're going to be getting in real late on Monday. Is what you said. So
yeah, I think my plane lands at like 7:30 or something like that. So
okay.
But yeah, all right, guys. Well, as always, man, another fantastic episode of Blockchain Buzz, and thanks for coming, guys. And we will talk. Thank you, everybody, for sticking around and watching, and thanks for the questions. Deuces.
Deuces.
All right, have a good one. God bless.
See you guys later.